What is up, everyone? Welcome back to the Raw Prospect Podcast. My name is Amy Nixon. Today is October 4th, 2022. And joining me from Austin, Texas, as always, the Stat King himself, Mr. Michael Weem. What's up?
It was a historic night here on October 4th, 2022, as we witnessed history, or most of the country did. Coming into tonight, Aaron Judge, as we know, we've been following it all season. Number 99 for the New York Yankees, right fielder, center fielder sometimes as well. Came in to the night, second game of a doubleheader against the Texas Rangers. Already clinched the AL East, locked into their playoff position. I'll get to that in a minute. With 61 home runs. A record he tied last week against the Toronto Blue Jays in Toronto when he hit his 61st home run to tie Roger Maris's American League record of 61 home runs, which he set all the way back 61 years ago in 1961. And tonight, the Yankees coming into the game at 99 and 61. Aaron Judge's number, 99, with 61 home runs. He hits number 62, breaks the American League record. He's now the single-season American League record home run king. But the Yankees lose the game, unfortunately, to the Texas Rangers by a score of 3-2, dropping their record to 99 and 62, which is ironic because Aaron Judge is number 99 and he hit number 62. So just kind of all around a historic night. Garrett Cole breaks the single season strikeout record in Yankees history, and a lot goes down. So it was a historic night, and we're here on October 4th, about close to midnight, about to record another Football Picks podcast. But before we get to all that, with the last day of the regular season tomorrow and the wild card series beginning Friday, the MLB postseason bracket on both sides is now fully set. The matchups are set. Everything's set. Nothing more is to be decided tomorrow on the last day of the regular season. So I'm going to run through it real fast. Probably going to do a preview podcast on Thursday for the wild card series at the very least. And then we'll get into our segments for today. In the American League, the number one seed with home field advantage throughout the playoffs will be the Houston Astros, with, I believe, after tonight, 105 victories. The number two seed getting the second bye will be the New York Yankees, 99 and 62, as I mentioned. They will get a chance to get their 100th win in the last game tomorrow in Arlington. They will get the bye. The wild card series in the American League, the 4 and the 5 matchup. The Toronto Blue Jays, the top wild card team, will face off against the number 5 seed, making their first appearance in the playoffs since 2001, the Seattle Mariners. The winner of that series will play the Houston Astros in the ALDS. And in the other series, the number 6 seed Tampa Bay Rays will face off against the third division winner in the American League, the Cleveland Guardians. And the winner of that series will face the New York Yankees in the Bronx in the ALDS. In the National League, We have the Dodgers, who I believe are up to like over 110 wins now, having a historic year. They will face the winner of the Mets, who lose out on the AL East, unfortunately, to the Braves, and the Padres, who now have Juan Soto. So it'll be Mets Padres in the 4-5 matchup in the National League, playing the Dodgers in the NLDS. And then on the top of the bracket, the number 2 seed Atlanta Braves, who locked up the NL East title for the 5th straight year tonight with a win over the Marlins. They will face the winner of the NL Central winner, St. Louis Cardinals, who will face the Philadelphia Phillies and Bryce Harper, who made their first postseason appearance since 2011. So it's all set. Baseball season ends tomorrow, and we get underway with the playoffs on Friday. So get ready for that. We'll be covering it all on this podcast. But for tonight, we're going to talk football. So let's just go ahead and get into that.
Yeah. But before football, we are going to do Prospect of the Week. We're going to bring that segment back. It's really the only ongoing segment we have on this podcast, other than our picks podcast, which we only do during the regular season. So go ahead and start off with that if you have anyone in mind.
Well, there's a couple in mind, but I guess for today, I'll just go with Kenny Pickett. He's going to be the Steelers' starting quarterback for the rest of the season, I believe. Mike Tomlin named him the starter for this weekend's game against Buffalo. The Steelers at 1-3 with a really tough schedule upcoming. We have the Bills on the road, the Buccaneers at home, and then the Dolphins and Eagles both on the road before we hit the bye week. It could be looking rough, but what we saw from Kenny Pickett when he came into the game in the second half on Sunday against the Jets, we saw an immediate change in energy. We saw a spark in two of the first 3 drives with Kenny Pickett. They scored touchdowns after only scoring 4 touchdowns in 42 drives with Mitch Trubisky. We drafted him with the number 20 overall pick in this past year's draft out of the University of Pittsburgh. He's been playing at Heinz Field. He's mature beyond his years, as Mike Tomlin spoke to. You can see it. He commands the room, commands the huddle. He knows the offense. He's yet to throw an incompletion. There are going to be some growing pains. I know, 10 of those completions were to the Steelers players, 3 were to the other team, which was unfortunate, but he's yet to throw an incompletion, technically, and I'm excited to watch him grow the rest of the season. We got to see what we have here in Kenny Pickett. We're not sure. We know the kid can play. We know he has some game. We know he's mobile. We're excited about, some of his intangibles, his maturity. We obviously don't know what the ceiling looks like. It could be more limited ceiling, but I'm excited that we get to see what we have, because the way this is going, we could have a high draft pick next year. And if we don't think Kenny Pickett's the guy, we got to know that before this upcoming draft, so maybe we can draft another quarterback or go a different direction. So that's what it is. That's what the situation in Pittsburgh is right now. But I'm just generally excited to watch Kenny Pickett.
Yeah, and as you should be. I mean, we've pretty much been waiting on when he'll be put in for a while. So, but my prospect of the week is Jared Goff. Obviously, came off a loss this week where he did have a pick 6, but we all know the narrative around Jared Goff, and I'm not here to tell you that any of that is untrue. But the fact is, he is the quarterback leading the number 1 scoring offense in football. So all I'm doing here is just giving him a little bit of love, giving him the credit he deserves. He has been playing some really good football this year and not getting much credit for it. Not a lot of people are talking about Jared Goff, which is understandable. He's on the Lions, he's on Detroit, but I mean, he's definitely done some good things, and if he continues to play like this, I think the Lions should at least consider, keeping him around.
Absolutely. The Lions, they're 1-3, but they're a lot better than that record indicates, I think. And, if their defense could get stops, they could have a much better record. They had a lead. I think they controlled most of that game last week against Minnesota. And, they had a chance to win that game against Seattle. And now that I think about it, we got to give some love to Geno Smith. He's been really kicking butt in Seattle, and that's been really surprising to me. I think I'm going to end up being fairly wrong about the Seahawks. They look pretty good. Tariq Woolen, a guy that they drafted out of UTSA, is making an impact in that secondary. They're running the football. Rashad Penny looks healthy and rejuvenated for the first time in his career. They got some weapons on the outside with DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So Seahawks look a lot better than I thought, but that's another conversation for another day. With that, every 4 weeks here on the Raw Prospect Podcast, we're going to be doing a top 5 NFL power rankings. And so we're going to transition into our first power ranking segment of the season. We're going to do our top 5. I don't know how you want to go through this. Do you want me to go through my top 5 and then you go through your top 5, or we go alternating?
I think alternating would work better, actually.
Okay.
I'll just start with my number 5. At 5, I have the Baltimore Ravens. I just think what Lamar brings to the table, what him being on the field presents for their defense, it can't be understated. He's borderline unstoppable, and if a couple things fall their way, they're beating one of the best teams in the league, and we're talking about something entirely different with the Baltimore Ravens. So I think Baltimore is going to get some of their defensive kinks figured out as the season goes along. They have a lot of talent on that side of the ball, and this offense is already where it needs to be. When it comes to closing games, I think that'll get ironed out as well as the season goes along. I'm not too worried about that. Obviously, the interception on that 4th and 2 wasn't ideal, but John Harbaugh, he's an aggressive coach. That's how he's always been, and he's been very successful that way. So I'm not going to fault him for it. I think it was actually the right decision. It just didn't end up falling their way, and I ultimately picked them at 5 above the Packers simply because I have more confidence in Baltimore's offense being able to, hang tight in, say, a high scoring affair than I would with the Packers currently. But that could change as the season goes along as well for the Packers. So
Before we go on, we should explain because we both did separate lists. We should explain our criteria for how we decided on these power rankings. So do you want to explain your criteria? And then I'll explain
I'll
mine.
go over it real quick. Yeah. My criteria is basically it's a snapshot of basically who I think the top 5 teams are right now. And I'd like to think that it would be in order of, this team would beat this team, this team would beat this team, this team would beat this team. But it's not that simple. But I think if I were to put it simply, that's about as simple as I could put it. I think my higher up teams could beat the teams behind them, and so on and so forth.
Okay, fair enough. For me, I had 3 criteria for my list, and then I'll get into my number 5 team. First, I looked at your upcoming schedule, your next 4 games, because if we're going to do this every 4 weeks, I kind of want to see what do we have upcoming, what are your chances of keeping the momentum going over the next 4 weeks until the next time we do the Raw Prospect podcast? So I'm sort of, in a way, projecting forward for the next month or so of the season to see if, teams, in one case may get a scheduling break and other teams may not. So I wanted to see what your upcoming schedule is over the next month. I think winning in multiple ways is super important. Being not one-dimensional, not having to win one particular way is important to me. So I think a lot of the teams on this list have shown that they can win in multiple ways. And, this is only the top 5. So, teams in the top 10, if we were to extend this list out to our top 10, other teams could do it as well. But I think that's important. And then just what I've seen over my eye tests. I'm not a big eye test guy, but I didn't have the time to, compile all the stats and stuff that I like to for this particular podcast. So we're just going with the eye test for this particular list. My number 6 team, and I have no problem with you putting Baltimore. I really considered Baltimore for number 5 spot, but I just couldn't unsee the fact that they've blown 2 double-digit leads at home in games that they should have won, no doubt. But and I know they were, playing good teams. And look, Lamar Jackson is, to this point, maybe in the lead for MVP the way he's playing. Those receivers are stepping up. The defense, while it's not great, and you can move the ball, it's the worst pass defense in the NFL right now. They do create turnovers, and that's something that needs to be taken into consideration. But for me, I went with the Green Bay Packers at 5. It was really close between the Packers and the Ravens. I think they're pretty interchangeable at this point. Even though it hasn't been, the prettiest football the first 4 weeks of the season, and the way that they've won hasn't been necessarily a way of winning that might be sustainable moving forward. But I do think, things are starting to get ironed out. Rodgers is gaining some trust. I really love what Romeo Doubs has provided their offense. And their defense, at this point, I trust their defense a lot more than I do Baltimore's defense. And Aaron Rodgers is still that guy. They have a good running game. You could go either way, but I went with the Packers as my number 5 team. Their upcoming schedule is manageable. They play the Giants in London. That's a winnable game. The Giants are playing good football, but that's a winnable game. Then you come home. You play a Jets team that might be better than we think, but that's also a winnable game. Then you go at the Commanders, who don't look very good right now. And then, 4 weeks from now, you're at the Bills. But that's a pretty manageable schedule for the next month or so. I think Green Bay can win certainly 2, maybe 3 of those games and keep their place in my top 5 teams. So that's who I went with, but I totally understand where you're coming from with Baltimore.
All right. Moving on to my number 4 team, I have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I just think the Bucs, obviously, they just lost to the Kansas City Chiefs, but I think their defense, what they showed in the 3 weeks before that can't be understated as well. I think their defense will be fine. I think they just kind of ran into Mahomes playing his best. And I don't think any defense would have been able to stop Mahomes on that night the way he was playing. So I think the way this defense plays, how good they are in the back end and up front, and then on offense, I just think Tom Brady will find a way to figure it out. I have faith in that, and until then, they're going to be winning a lot of close games, just because he knows how to manage the game. He's not going to make mistakes, and he's going to lead this team to where they're not going to be able to just, give games away. Like, you're going to have to give 4 really good quarters to beat the Bucs. Because I mean, we saw it in the Chiefs game, and they were kind of creeping back, and then the Chiefs put them away. And then the Packers game, same thing. They were creeping back into that game when the Packers slowed down in that second half. I just think the Bucs, they're just a solid team all around, and they've done it before.
For my number 4, I went with the Miami Dolphins, who started 3-0, had 3 really solid wins over the Patriots, the Ravens, and the Bills. They're coming off a loss at Cincinnati, a game that I thought they would lose going in on a short week. With Tua's health sort of uncertain, they of course lose Tua Tagovailoa, who we all hope is okay and is going through concussion protocol and is going to be out this week against the Jets. But they played really good football. I think that needs to be acknowledged. Beating 2 of the better teams in the AFC, they're already 2-0 in division with wins over the Patriots and the Bills. They also beat another AFC foe in the Ravens, who we both think could be a top 5 NFL team. And I thought for a lot of that game against Cincinnati, they played really well. It was just Cincinnati at the end of the day made more plays. We like the defense. We know you can move the ball in the defense, but they really tighten up in the red zone. It is hard to score on Miami in the red zone. And we obviously love what they added on the outside, on the perimeter offensively. And Mike McDaniels, to me, looks like a home run hire. The way he's able to draw up plays at the right time, he just looks like one of the better play callers in the league. And I think they're really placating towards Tua's strengths. So I think what the Dolphins have done so far has been warrants them of this spot. And then you look at their schedule at the Jets. We know that will be without Tua. It's not going to be an easy game, but it's certainly winnable. Come home, you play the Vikings next week, which will be interesting. But if you have Tua back at that point, you could certainly see them being in that game and maybe winning that game. The Steelers, who don't look too good right now, at home, and then at Detroit. That's certainly winnable. So the schedule is going to lighten up over the next 4 to 6 games, and you could really see Miami win a lot of these games. So that I'm sort of projecting forward, but I'm also, if Tua's healthy, I think this team is going to be one of the better teams in the league throughout the season. I think the way they're playing is fairly sustainable.
I agree. Yeah. I consider the Dolphins as well. I just um, I had a rough time kind of projecting where they will be at, with Teddy in the lineup. But if Tua was healthy, I think they would 100% be on this list for me as well. But for my number 3 team, I went with the Philadelphia Eagles. Um, Pretty self-explanatory here. They're the only undefeated team left. They just played a very feisty Jaguars team that I think is pretty good in a very impressive way as well. They took a punch early in that first quarter, down 14-0 in the rain, and then they punched back. And it goes back to your point of winning in multiple ways. It's extremely important, and the Eagles have been able to display that on multiple occasions this season in a way that they weren't able to last year. So I just think this roster, with the addition of James Bradbury, with how Darius Slay is playing, I just think this defense is stacked all across the board. And Jalen Hurts, as long as he continues to play like a top 10, top 12 quarterback, this team could win a Super Bowl.
Absolutely. I had the Kansas City Chiefs at 3. The only reason I didn't put them above the Eagles, who I have at 2, is because of their schedule. It's going to really toughen up the next 5-6 weeks. The Raiders at home this week, but then the Bills come to town next week. The good thing is you get both those games at home at Arrowhead, which is a super tough place to play. Then you're at the Niners, who was really good last night. That defense is aggressive, physical. That's not going to be an easy game. And then home against the Titans team that's looked better the past couple of weeks and can certainly run the football. So Look, the Chiefs, I think they made a statement the way that they came out on Sunday night against the Buccaneers, against a good defense. Putting 41 on that defense is not easy, especially at their place. And Patrick Mahomes is still that guy. And as we talked about before the season, they did lose Tyreek Hill, but they have a more diversified portfolio at the wide receiver position in terms of what they can do and the different skill sets that they have. And I think, with the number one rush defense so far in the league, it's going to be different this year. You're not going to be able, well, at least it looks like so far, you're not going to be able with Chris Jones in the middle of that defense, who I believe right now is the second best interior defensive lineman in the NFL behind Aaron Donald. You're not going to be able to play keep away with this Chiefs defense the way you were able to in past years, where you can just run the football, run the clock, and keep the ball away from Patrick Mahomes. No, this run defense is really good. You're not going to get a lot of running room against this Chiefs defensive line. And while you can move the ball through the air, we've certainly seen that. I just think this offense on most days is they're going to be able to outscore you. So I think the Chiefs are really good. The only thing I'm sort of skeptical about is I want to see how they navigate this schedule the next month and a half because it is brutal, if you will. But there's nothing that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes and an improved run defense can't handle. So I have the Chiefs at 3, and then I'll just go ahead since I already mentioned it. I have the Eagles at 2. They're undefeated, playing complimentary football, running the ball. Jalen Hurts has obviously taken another step. Adding A.J. Brown really helps. Devontae Smith is still really good. You have other weapons as well. The offensive line looks good. And this defense is physical, and they can get up in your face. And look, the schedule, it's also fairly manageable at the Cardinals, the Cowboys at home, the Steelers, and then the Texans. So I like where the Eagles are going, and they certainly deserve to be up here on the list.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. For my number 2, I went with the Buffalo Bills. So we actually didn't agree on any of our selections, which is pretty interesting. That's pretty rare on this podcast if you're a regular listener. But reason I chose the Bills at 2 is, it's not because I don't believe in this team. They're still my pick to win the Super Bowl. It's just they are very beat up right now, all across the board. Offensive line, wide receiver, in the secondary. I think they'll be able to weather the storm and keep winning games. But like I said earlier, my power rankings is more about if there were to be a win or go home situation between the teams in my power rankings, these are who I would think would win the games. And in this case, I chose the Chiefs over the Bills, and I'll get into why I think the Chiefs are better right now when I get to my number 1 spot. But the Bills are fantastic. It's like no discredit to them for why I put them at 2. I just think right now the Chiefs have the edge for me.
I have the Bills at number 1. I've been saying since the start of the season, I even tweeted this out, that I think the Bills at full strength are the best team in the NFL. And they check all the boxes for me in my criteria. The eye test, they passed that. They've had a couple ugly moments here and there, but for the most part, being able to come back from however many points it was, 17 or 20 down this weekend in Baltimore, was fantastic. Almost, it was a tough game down there in Miami. That heat, I've seen it get to a lot of teams. They had a little slip up there, but other than that, I really love what I've seen from the Bills. I know they're not going to be fully full strength for the rest of the season because they did lose Micah Hyde. They're missing some pieces in that secondary right now, but you can get after the passer. I think the addition of Von Miller has really taken their pass rush to another level. I still do worry about their ability to run the football consistently when it's not Josh Allen running. But that has looked better. And I just think with Diggs and Gabriel Davis and Dawson Knox and everyone else that they have, Isaiah McKenzie, they're with Josh Allen playing quarterback, they're the best team in the league. They have the Steelers at home. Then they're at the Chiefs. Next week, we're going to get into our picks here in a minute. It's not the greatest slate in the world, but next week, I mean, just wait. I mean, we're going to get some really good games next week. Just to preview that. But yeah, I do think it's close. I think right now, I think you can certainly make an argument the Chiefs are the healthier team. They might be even the better team right now. But as I said earlier, it's a little bit of a different criteria. I see this in a little bit of a different way. I think the Bills are going to be able to certainly navigate their schedule easier than the Kansas City Chiefs will the upcoming 4 weeks. But yeah, so I have the Packers, the Dolphins, the Chiefs, the Eagles, and the Bills as my post-week 4 power rankings. And you had the – who did you have again? You had the
I had the
Ravens, the
Ravens,
Bucks.
yeah,
Ravens,
Ravens,
Bucks,
Bucks,
Eagles.
Eagles, Bills, then Chiefs. But let me just get into why I picked the Chiefs real fast. I just see it as the Chiefs can run the ball and they can do it at an extremely high level. That element to their offense, I think they've dived into that side of offensive football a little bit more this year, and it's really paid dividends. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is really running it well. Isaiah Pacheco is really, giving them kind of a lightning thunder dynamic that I really like. You still have Jerick McKinnon as a third guy, in passing situations. I just really like this running back room, and I think I'm not going to say the Bills can't run the football; they just don't, and that's I think the difference for me right now. I think the Bills, when it matters most, they're going to be fine running the football because they're going to run Josh Allen more. That's self-explanatory. But the Chiefs, they have a more diversified offense, not just at the wide receiver position. I just think their defense is coming together well. That secondary has looked good, and Mahomes is on a mission. You could say the same about the Bills too, though.
Yeah, you could say the same about
Just
a lot
barely.
of these teams.
Yeah,
But
it's tough. It's really close, as Michael said. It really just depends on how you look at it.
absolutely. And I think 4 weeks down the road, these could look very similar to how they do now, or they could look very, very different, just based on some of the scheduling things that I talked about. And also, injuries happen and this and
Evans
that.
pick at 5 going south. But with that, we'll go ahead and move on to our picks. I guess in the NFL, we could go ahead and do the NFL picks first, or what did you have in mind there?
But we're already on the topic of the NFL, so we're going to do. I know we've been doing college first, then NFL, but since we did our power rankings for NFL, let's jump right into our NFL picks for week number 5.
Alrighty then.
We'll
Okay,
wrap it
first
up
game.
with. We'll
First
wrap it up
game is going to
with.
be. Oh, sorry.
So I think we're kind of stepping on each other's feet. I don't know what's going on, but
Yeah, I just got a notification on my screen that the connection is acting up. So sorry about that, guys, if you're having audio issues on your end watching. But the first matchup is the Chargers at Cleveland. Chargers favored -2.5. I'll go first. This is an interesting matchup because of how much the Chargers have struggled stopping the run these past few years. If it wasn't for that, I would be very confident picking the Chargers. But this Cleveland Browns running game makes this very interesting. I think that is, at the very least, going to make this very interesting. The other part of this is just going to depend on Jacoby Brissett. He's had, you know, a lot of ups and a couple downs here and there, and ultimately he's been a lot better than a lot of people have thought he was going to do. And last week, I think it was his worst game of the year. Made a lot of bad throws, missed throws, bailing from clean pockets. Had that interception late that sealed the game for the Falcons. Wasn't a very clean game from him. But if he can bounce back, the Browns can absolutely win this game. But I really liked what I saw from the Chargers against the Texans last week. I just think they had a fire lit under them in a different way than I had seen from the Chargers before, and I think that'll carry over into this week. I think I'm going to pick the Chargers. I'm going to pick them to win. It's in Cleveland. I'm going to say like 24 20. So I'm going to pick them to cover the spread.
Yeah, it is an interesting matchup. You talked about the Cleveland running game. I think this Cleveland offensive line, when it's fully healthy, is still top notch in the National Football League when it comes to blocking in the run game and also in pass protection. Jacoby Brissett, for the most part, has played solid football. He's done enough to win in most cases the first 4 weeks of the season. But obviously, as you mentioned, against the Falcons, made some mistakes, did some uncharacteristic things. They ended up losing that game, a game they probably should have won. But it happens. It's the NFL. There's no easy wins or no easy games. Any given Sunday for any given team can go right or wrong. So you sit here at 2-2, and if you can kind of hold your head above water for the next 6-ish weeks until Deshaun Watson comes back, you could put yourself in a pretty good position if you're the Browns to make a playoff push, which I didn't really foresee coming into the season. But that running game is dangerous. Nick Chubb, a lot of the times, you see him run the football, and he's not even touched the first 5 yards or the first 10 yards. That's how good this Cleveland running game is. And with some of the Chargers' struggles stopping the run, that is a bit concerning. And then you look at what the Browns are able to do through the air with Amari Cooper. I know A.J. Terrell, man, has he been fantastic so far this season. He did a really good job on Amari Cooper last week. But I do think you're going to see the Browns be able to move the football, probably score some points on this Chargers defense that's missing Joey Bosa. But I think the difference now for the Chargers is you obviously have added pieces to this defense to kind of make up for that loss. You have Khalil Mack on this defensive line. And in the secondary, you have a guy like J.C. Jackson who can match up with Amari Cooper and sort of take him out of the game. And then from an offensive perspective for the Chargers, it's just all about Justin Herbert. What does his health look like? Is he healthy enough? But I think he is. And, he's been missing weapons here and there, but this Chargers offense have been able to, for the most part, look the part. And I think against the Browns defense that's had some trouble the first 4 weeks of the season, obviously playing without Jadeveon Clowney for some of that and playing without Myles Garrett for some of that hasn't helped. But I agree with you. I think the Chargers will be able to score enough points. Cleveland might keep it close. This game is in Cleveland, but I do think the Chargers – look, if you're going to make the playoffs, if you're going to be competing in the AFC West, if you want to compete for Super Bowls, this is the type of game the Chargers need to win. And they need to start winning these type of games consistently. You have the better quarterback. I think you have the better team, but you're dealing with some injuries, and I think you have the quarterback that can overcome those injuries. I think we've seen that. So I'm going to
Exactly.
pick the Chargers to win, pull away late, and cover the spread.
Okay. Next matchup. My Dallas Cowboys at the Los Angeles Rams. Rams favored -4.5. Um, Cooper Rush is projected to play at the moment. Dak Prescott is looking like he's going to miss this game as well and play possibly the following week. So, what do you think here?
This is an interesting one. I think this is a bad matchup for the Rams. This Dallas pass rush looks really good. I think it's might be the best in the league at this point. A guy like Micah Parsons who can wreck the game on any given Sunday. DeMarcus Lawrence. Who's the other guy? Number 90, 92, I think. Or
Neville
90.
Gallimore.
Yeah, he's been really good in the middle of that defensive line. Um, this defensive front is aggressive. They get after the quarterback, and the Rams have been having some real problems on that offensive line. Joseph Noteboom on the left side hasn't been as good as I thought he would be coming into the season. He played well at points and times last year, but has been struggling this year. They're really missing that veteran presence in Andrew Whitworth on that offensive line more than I thought. And there is some inconsistency outside of Cooper Kupp's production. They're not really getting any sort of production from Allen Robinson, who they chose to replace Robert Woods, who they traded to Tennessee. Tyler Higbee's been fine at the tight end position. But outside of Cooper Kupp, I worry that they're too Cooper Kupp reliant. And yes, they can run the ball, but this offensive line, once again, is a real concern, I think, for the Rams. And you look at the NFC, the teams you're trying to beat, the Niners have an aggressive defensive front. The Eagles have an aggressive defensive front. Even the Packers they have a really stout defensive front. I just worry about how the Rams match up, given that their offensive line struggles or has been struggling to this point. If they get that figured out, obviously you have Stafford, you have the better quarterback. You should be able to win this game at home. But this Dallas defense is playing really good football. Cooper Rush, for the most part, is playing mistake-free football. That's good to see. That's all you really need him to do. And the Cowboys are doing a good job in the run game. I'm going to pick Dallas to cover. I feel pretty confident about that just because I really like the matchup of this Dallas defensive front against this Rams offensive line. But it's tough who I'm going to pick to win the game straight up. So come back to me on that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think you hit the nail right on the head, man. This Cowboys defense, it may not be the best in the league necessarily, but I think they're probably the scariest in the league. When you look at it, like they have possibly the two best playmakers at their respective positions in Michael Parsons and Trayvon Diggs in terms of getting takeaways, making plays, getting in your face, playing with rabies, as Brett Coleman would say. I mean, there isn't really much else people can say about Michael Parsons that hasn't been already said. I mean, people just gush about him for good reason. And I'm not going to get into all of that right now. The factor here is, like you said, this Rams offensive line has been porous at best. I mean, it's been anemic. And it also seems like Matthew Stafford isn't quite right as well. Um, he was missing some throws. He had like a few mental lapses that you don't really see from him in that game last on Monday, or it was last night. It just feels like a long time ago, but um, he didn't seem quite right either. So I'm kind of in a pinch here. I think the line is right where it should be at. I think it's going to be a low scoring game ultimately, and I think that points me towards the Cowboys covering the spread. But I think I will I think I am going to choose the Rams to win in spite of myself, but I'm going to choose the Cowboys to cover. Um, I think the only reason I'm choosing the Rams to win is just to cover my ass for later, just because I think one or the other will happen. I think I'll hit on either the spread or the Rams winning. Um, I don't think I'll miss on both of those for
Well,
the
we had
sake of some competition.
one thing I should point out is we actually had really good weeks last week in our picks. We
Yeah,
really
yeah,
picked
we
up
did.
some steam here. So if you weren't feeling too confident about us after we did our first picks podcast, which was kind of rough, you can kind of feel better about our picks the past couple of weeks as they've gotten better each and every week. Um, Emmy actually went 5 out of 6 outright, straight up, picking the winners of games last week. The only one he got wrong was the Ravens, who probably should have won that game, but some decisions went the other way. I was actually 6 for 6 as I had the Bills. So we've been really good picking games straight up. And against the spread last week, uh, we did pretty well. I was 5-1 in my NFL picks against the spread, and Emmy was 3-3, but he was 4-1 in college, which is pretty impressive. So yeah, we've picked up some steam. I think I'm going to agree with you. I'm going to take the Cowboys to cover the spread. I think, in fact, I might even make that my lock, but I'm not sure yet. Uh, but I'm going to take the Rams to escape somehow at home, a game that they need to win.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be a desperation factor in it as well. Okay, next matchup. Um, the Philadelphia Eagles, the one remaining undefeated team in the NFL, going to Arizona to play the Cardinals, favored -5.5. Um, I don't think this is a very favorable matchup for the Cardinals. I don't think a lot of teams match up with the Eagles, but especially a team like the Cardinals, where you have a team that's um, kind of light in in the trenches. I think just like interior of their O line, interior of their defensive line. They lack some of that physical presence that is needed. Obviously, they still have J.J. Watt, who's played pretty solid for his age, but as you may have seen on our last pod where we were talking about panic meter, I'm not high on this Cardinals team. They're eking out wins. You got to give them credit for that. They're beating the teams in front of them. But I just think this Eagles team presents an entirely different challenge, and I think they're gonna put the hammer down here. I think I'm gonna pick the Eagles to win big here. I'm gonna pick them to win 31-20, maybe a late garbage time touchdown for the Cardinals.
Yeah, I'm a little bit more high on the Cardinals than you are, as I explained last podcast. But look, I do think this is a bad matchup. The Eagles are a physical team. I don't think the Cardinals match up all too well against teams like the Eagles that are aggressive in the defensive front and can cover in the back end, uh, create turnovers. They play complementary football. They run the football, control time of possession. And I don't think this Arizona secondary matches up particularly well against these Philadelphia weapons, A.J. Brown and, um, Devontae Smith. So I am going to pick the Eagles to win and cover. I made this mistake last week betting against the Eagles. They started slow, found a way to win, come back in that game against a tough Jacksonville defense. So, yeah, I think the Eagles, as I explained, I think they're the second best team in the NFL right now. Uh, Man, was I wrong about Nick Sirianni? They seem to hit a home run with that hire. They've really changed the direction of this franchise over the past 2 years. It's been pretty amazing to watch, and I believe they're going to have a top draft pick this upcoming season because of a trade. I forget what trade it was, but yeah, they're in really good position if you look at the Eagles moving forward. So, yeah, I think the Eagles are just a bad matchup for the Cardinals, and you'll see them win this game by a touchdown to 10 points.
Right, exactly. Okay, moving along. Last game of our NFL slate. It's Sunday Night Football, I believe, or it's either Sunday night or Monday night. I know it's on prime time. It's the Las Vegas Raiders visiting the Kansas City Chiefs, going to Arrowhead.
You skipped one.
Kansas City favored -7.5.
You skipped one. You skipped Cincinnati at Baltimore.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, you're right. Okay. Cincinnati and Baltimore first. Baltimore favored -3.5 at home. What do you think?
I'm going to go with Cincinnati here, plus 3.5. But I am going to take Baltimore to find a way to win this one at home. If you look at the matchups last year, Joe Burrow was able to rip this defense to shreds. He threw for over 400 yards in both matchups. Was absolutely fantastic against this Baltimore defense. The Ravens, of course, are really struggling to stop teams through the air. They're last in pass defense, as I've said multiple times. But I do think Lamar Jackson and the Ravens are going to find a way to win this game. It's not any deep analysis there. It's just a gut feeling. But I do think the Cincinnati Bengals, given the success that they've had against this Baltimore defense through the year, not only last year, but in Joe Burrow's time there, with all the weapons that they have, and a defense that I think is starting to figure it out a little bit. I think the Bengals will be able to cover the spread. It is a divisional game. These teams are very familiar with each other. So regardless of who wins, I do think Cincinnati will be able to cover this spread.
Okay, yeah. I think I'm right with you there. I think this game really comes down to um, the play calling of the Cincinnati Bengals a little bit. I think if they're able to attack this Baltimore defense, um, you know, in an efficient way, implementing the run game in the right moments, blending together concepts. Chris Sims talks about it on this podcast a lot. It's a podcast I've listened to a lot recently. Chris Sims Unbuttoned. I highly recommend it, by the way. Um, he talks about, blending plays together in a way that's sequenced and, you know, consequential to the next play to where the defense sees a look, thinks it's one play, and it'll be the other. And Zach Taylor has really struggled with that. I think this season in particular, I think that the concepts have been very vanilla. It's been very, Joe Burrow drop back and pass it, read the whole defense, and make a play for us. Um, I'd love to see them try to implement more creativity. And if they're able to do that, I think they'll win the game. But until I'll just have to see it to believe it. But until then, I'm going to pick the Bengals to cover, but I'm going to pick the Ravens to win just because I don't know how to feel about Zach Taylor's play calling right now.
Fair enough. So we'll move on to our last NFL game of the weekend. As you said a little bit earlier, this is the Monday night game. The Cincinnati-Baltimore game is the Sunday night game. Raiders at the Chiefs. Chiefs -7.5. So what is your feeling?
My initial feel is that this line feels very big. The Raiders are a team, they're a 1-3 team, but they're not a typical 1-3 in the fact that they're not just a team that's been rolling over, getting cooked every week, getting smacked around. Pause. But the point is, they've had leads in a lot of these games. They've played some very good teams. I'm I'm not completely out on the Raiders being a solid team, and I think they'll continue to be competitive. I don't think they're going to get. I don't think they're just going to go out and get smacked in Kansas City. I could be wrong there, but in a divisional matchup like this, I think they'll get up to play and be fired up. Um, it'll be a tough challenge on the road, but I think that ultimately, um, this Raiders offense, I think, found some good things in the second half of that Broncos game, and I think Derek Carr will be able to ride some of that momentum in efforts to keep this game close. So I think I'm going to pick the Raiders to cover this spread. That's a pretty, it's not a pick I feel great about, despite how big the spread is. But we saw this a lot last year, and those big spreads take the underdog most of the time. So I'm going to do that here. Pick the Chiefs to win, but the Raiders to cover.
Especially in the divisional game. I think you
Right.
have to take the underdog, even though it's a road underdog, and Kansas City is a really tough place to play. Remember what I mentioned earlier. You can move the ball through the air against this Kansas City defense. It's going to be the Raiders' ability to find ways to run the football that may ultimately even give them the chance to sneak this game out. Because I believe, if I'm not mistaken, it was either last year or the year before that they were able to win in Kansas City. So they've
Yeah.
done that before. And adding Devontae Adams, you have Darren Waller, you have Hunter Renfrow. I think the key for the Raiders, if they want to win this game, is going to be running the football. If they can be somewhat effective in that area, I do think they have the pass rush that can get the job done and keep this game relatively close. And I do think that they are a better football team than their record indicates. They had some weird breaks not fall their way the first couple of weeks of the season. And I think you're going to see this Derek Carr, Devontae Adams connection really pick up steam over the next couple of weeks. So they're even a team that I considered in our predictions podcast to make the playoffs, as they made the playoffs last season, and people said they got better. Now, there are questions, of course, on that offensive line. That's not great considering what the Chiefs have up front, but it's a divisional game. These games are always close. They find a way to be close. I think the Chiefs will win, but I do think the Raiders will cover this spread pretty comfortably, actually.
Right. Yeah, I'm almost tempted to pick this game as my lock, but I am going to wait on that until the end. Moving on here, though, over to college football now, guys. Second half of the episode here, home stretch. Tennessee Volunteers, number 8 team in the country, favored -2.5, going to Death Valley, facing the LSU Tigers. What do you think?
I'm glad this game isn't a night game for Tennessee. It is actually an 11 a.m. kick, which I think benefits Tennessee actually, because at night that LSU, Death Valley is wild. I do think it's going to be a little bit more of a. It's never a subdued environment in the SEC, but I do think they get a break there in terms of scheduling. This Tennessee offense is one that, as I said, they go really fast. They're actually the third fastest offense in terms of time between plays that they take between plays in the entire country. And Hendon Hooker, if I had to pick today, I think would be in my top 4 for the Heisman candidacy. So he's been playing great football, finding ways to, I think he's the highest rated quarterback in the SEC right now, and he's also hasn't turned the ball over yet this season. This LSU defense has been playing better football since the Florida State game in week 1, and they're an opportunistic defense. They're forcing turnovers at a high rate. But this Tennessee offense does not turn the football over. So I think if LSU wants a chance to win, they're going to have to win the turnover battle. On the other side, you have Jaden Daniels, who's played also really good football so far this season. The question is going to be, this Tennessee pass rush is improved. Can he make plays off script in the passing game? We know what he can do with his legs, but can he make plays off script in the passing game, make plays downfield? If he can do that, LSU can certainly have a chance to win this game with the talent they have on the outside with a guy like Kayshon Boutte and some other talent that they have. LSU has the players. The question is, do they have the culture built in yet? So I think Tennessee's going to win and cover. It's a 2.5-point spread, which gives me a certain amount of confidence that they will. I do think we've seen now that I think they are the third best team in the SEC, but it is a tough spot. And the reason why is because Tennessee gets Alabama at home next weekend, which is going to be one of the biggest games of the entire regular season. You cannot look ahead to that game if you're Tennessee, because you will lose this game if you don't come out ready to play against an LSU team that has the players, but we're just not sure is mature enough yet because they are a younger team. So I like Tennessee's chances because of their ability to play smart football, play complementary football, and sort of wear on this LSU defense by going fast, picking up the pace, something LSU really hasn't seen yet. And Hendon Hooker's unbelievable. But certainly won't be surprised if it's close throughout the first 2-3 quarters. Even if LSU has a lead at some point, certainly won't be surprised. But I'm going to go with the better quarterback, the more experienced quarterback. And I think at this point, the better team, especially on the back end in that secondary for Tennessee. That's really an area that they've been able to play pretty complimentary football. What do you think? Imy? Hello?
Yeah, sorry. Sorry, just kind of dozed off there. I think this game, man, I think this Tennessee team is kind of getting overlooked when you look at, the entire landscape of the country. And they're kind of moving under the radar a little bit here, but I think this could be the week where they really show themselves to be as good as they are. A big win on the road would be big for their confidence and big for their, I guess, SEC East campaign, I guess you could say. So I am going to pick Tennessee to win and cover. I think simply because they are playing in Death Valley, I think LSU will keep it close. I think it'll be close all the way through. But I just think Tennessee's offense is explosive, and eventually that'll show itself.
Okay. With that, we'll move on. If you would have told me that on the week of Texas OU, that both Texas and OU would be unranked, but also the fact that College Game Day would be going to Lawrence, Kansas, not for basketball, but for football, for a matchup with TCU of all teams, I and everybody that knows anything about college football would have called you on drugs and crazy, out of your mind. But that's where we stand right now. Number 17, undefeated. And look, you said this before I did. You said before the season started that the Big 12 is going to be way more interesting than people think. Coming into the season, look where we are now. I think aside from the SEC, the top dogs in the SEC, I think you can make the argument right now that the Big 12 top to bottom is the deepest conference in the country. I would certainly make that argument. I think a lot of people would. But yeah, that's where we sit right now. Number 17, TCU, actually favored by 7 on the road against a really well-coached football team in Kansas that's found different ways to win so far. Number 19 in the polls this week after not being ranked last week. So what do you think here in this Big 12 battle?
Well, like you said, it's very surprising to see this Kansas team undefeated. But, it's been cool to see, being in Kansas for college, some of the hype that's been going around the state of Kansas. I've been seeing a lot of blue and red walking around that I hadn't been seeing before. So it's a little bit suspicious, but that's another conversation for another day. As for this team, I mean, they were ranked, I believe, sixth in the country in total offense before this last game, where they put up 12 points against a tough Iowa State team in Ames. So they're a team that's resilient. Clearly, being able to win a game in Iowa State in that fashion when your team has leaned on your offense all season, um, to me that tells me a lot. So I feel pretty good about Kansas covering this spread. I don't know if they'll win the game, um, but I think I honestly do feel pretty confident in Kansas. You know, at least being keeping this at a field goal or less. Um, you know what? I'll go ahead and pick the upset just to switch things up. I mean, I think I think Kansas. I mean, they've shown themselves to be a very good team. Their schedule has been tough. They've won tough road games, and I think they'll come out on top here.
Yeah, college game days going there. It's going to be wild. It's going to be another sellout. I believe they had their first sellout ever 2 weeks ago, or not first sellout ever, but first sellout in a long time. Um, a couple of weeks ago when they played, I forget who it was. They were on the road last week at Ames, but it was Duke. Yeah, the Duke
Yep.
game 2 weeks ago. They sold out. This game's going to be even more wild. The hype is there. Lance Leopold, I think, is the leading candidate for Coach of the Year. But on the other side, you have a guy in Sonny Dykes for TCU, replacing Gary Patterson, comes over from SMU, which is typically he had that football program up and running for a while there. It's a good football program, and he's running a really good show in Fort Worth right now with this TCU football program, who kind of kept that same identity that they had under Gary Patterson, the physicalness in the trenches, being able to run the football and play pretty solid defense. That's still the case at TCU. It's just Max Duggan right now is the difference, as he's playing a really good brand of football at the quarterback position. He's not turning the ball over. 0 interceptions so far this season, 11 touchdowns. You saw they boat raced Oklahoma last week. I do think this is a little bit of a letdown spot after absolutely boat racing OU team that we're actually going to find out how good or bad Oklahoma is this week against Texas. But yeah, I do think this is a little bit of a letdown spot. I do think Kansas, with the running ability of Jalen Daniels, who's great in the run and through the air, with this Kansas football team's ability to win in multiple ways. And I do think they've been tested a little bit more than TCU has to this point. I do
Right.
think they'll cover the spread. I'm not sure who's going to win the game, but I am going to go with TCU. I just think at some point in the back half of the schedule, if you look at the back half of the schedule for Kansas, I mean, if you're Kansas, you've already won. You've won 5 games. You're going to win another game here at some point. If you win this game, you're already bowl eligible, which is amazing considering the fact that coming into the year, their over/under win total in Vegas was 2.5. They way surpassed that already. They're going to be in a bowl game. They might even go further than that. I do think they could get to like an 8-4 season, which would be absolutely fantastic. But I just think TCU, they're playing really good football right now, and they are one of the better offenses in college football right now. So I think it will be close. Kansas will make it close. I can certainly see where they could win this game. If they do, man, we're going to have to start talking about Kansas, like how far can this go? But I do think TCU, people are really overlooking this TCU team. They're solid on both sides, and Sonny Dykes is up there with Lance Leopold for Coach of the Year candidates in college football.
Right.
But
Exactly.
I'm excited to watch this game in general. I mean, the Big 12 right now is on fire. Now, speaking of sort of not on fire, but this game still seems to be fire every season, the Red River rivalry. Texas and OU. Texas actually favored coming in -7. First time since 1998 that these teams will play each other with neither team ranked in the AP poll. So what do you think is going to happen?
Well, that's what's great about it. I have no idea what's going to happen. But what I do know is I think Bijan Robinson is going to be the difference for Texas. I think getting Quinn Ewers back is going to bring an energy to this team as well. Um, but like in the Red River rivalry, you have to assume that the game will be close. No matter how lopsided it gets in the first or second quarter, it will always be close in the fourth quarter. We saw that last year. We've seen it in past years with the crazy comeback with Kyler Murray. We saw that as well. Um, this game always has its shenanigans. So I will be taking Oklahoma to cover the spread, but I have Texas winning simply because I think they're the more confident football team right now. Oklahoma's reeling a little bit. And I think Quinn Ewers being back, I don't know if it's official yet, but the word that I've been hearing has been pretty optimistic that he'll be back. Um, so I feel pretty good about a Texas win here.
Sark has been really closed off about the quarterback situation. He hasn't told the media a whole lot, either whether that's in his Monday press conference or in his Thursday press conference. He's really sort of keeps that tight to the vest in terms of the quarterback situation, the health of these quarterbacks. Um, we've seen Hudson Card, the past, I guess it's 4 games now, or 4.5, 3.5 games, if you know, don't count the first quarter or so of that Alabama game. And he's played well, but he's been banged up. You can clearly see that he sort of has a gimp in his step. Got banged up in that Alabama game and has sort of played through injury, and that's been really good to see. He's a really tough kid and has played really well. Don't want to take anything away from Hudson Card, but it does really seem like, um, we're going to see Quinn Ewers on Saturday. And if it's anything like what we saw in that first quarter against Alabama, OU is going to be in trouble. I know Xavier Worthy has been a little dinged up, but he's coming off a big game, gained some momentum in that game against West Virginia with, I think it was 2 touchdowns. Jatavion Sanders is a guy that's getting overlooked, not only just for Texas fans, but in the Big 12 and in the country in terms of one of the better tight ends there is out there. He is a freshman, or he's actually a redshirt freshman, but he's a 5-star guy, really talented. They use him in a lot of different ways. He's been very involved in this offense. Sark actually said, and this is with some great receivers on this Texas team, that he has the best hands on the team of anybody. He catches everything that's put or thrown his way, and he can also do a lot, in the run game. Blocking and sort of that versatility has really helped this Texas offense out at times. And then obviously, as you said, this OU defense has been bad. They don't look very well coached right now. And that's sort of, it's interesting because the first couple weeks of the season, they looked like one of the better defenses in college football. But the past
Right.
couple weeks, they have not been good at all. I do expect them to come ready to play this game. They're going to be fired up, obviously. This is a rivalry that's always competitive and close. But for me right now, the uncertainty around whether or not Dylan Gabriel is going to play, I think really hurts OU's case right now. This Texas defense, outside of the second half against Texas Tech, I think has played really well this season. And I think you've seen their ability to, for the most part, stay focused. Jalen Ford at the linebacker position has been really stepping up. They've been getting pressure. They haven't always been getting the sacks that I want them to. Sometimes when they get to the quarterback is able to escape and make a play. I'd like to see more sacks and more turnover-worthy plays from this Texas defense, but they've held 4 of their first 5 opponents to under 20 points or under, and I think that's saying something. And that includes a Alabama offense that has looked really good the past couple of weeks, even with Bryce Young in or Bryce Young out. So I think you can say that this Texas defense is much improved. The addition to Gary Patterson to the staff, I think, is really going to help, or has really helped, and is going to help them in this game. And I think Texas is going to win and cover the spread. But I don't feel all that confident about that pick if Dylan Gabriel ends up playing in this game. But regardless, I do think Texas is going to find a way to win this one.
Right. Okay. Moving along. Second to last game here. It's Utah, number 11 in the country, -4.5, going to LA. I believe to play in LA Coliseum to play the UCLA Bruins, currently undefeated at 5-0, number 18 in the country. What do you think?
Well, Chip Kelly, for I think really the first time in his tenure at UCLA, has the guys to compete in this conference. And it seems to me that he has a really well-coached football team. He's running a really tight-knit ship over there at UCLA. Utah is another really good football team, dangerous, of course. They're physical. They can run the ball. Obviously, Cam Rising at the quarterback position, favored -4.5 on the road here. They were tested week 1, fell in a tough matchup against Florida, a game they probably shouldn't have lost, but ended up losing anyway. UCLA with Dorian Thompson-Robinson at the quarterback position, another quarterback that's been playing pretty good, solid, mistake-free football at the quarterback position. They're running the ball a lot better than they have in years past. They're finding ways to move the ball. Chip Kelly's play calling has been fantastic. This defense is playing a lot better than anyone thought it would. So I think if they can get after Cam Rising, they'll have a chance to win this game. I'm going to pick Utah to win, but that 4.5 number is a little bit big for me right now, considering how well this UCLA team is playing. A really good win against Washington last week, a game that they dominated up until the end, where Washington scored some garbage time touchdowns. I think UCLA can cover this game at home, cover the spread at home, but I do think Utah will find a way to win.
All right. Yeah, I agree. I think UCLA might just be 1 year away. And I also think Dorian Thompson-Robinson, as good as he looked in their last game, I believe it was against Washington State, I believe. As good as he looked, he really he has some limitations as a passer. He really relies on being a first-read quarterback. And, in college, when you're running this, spread offense scheme, you can really get away with that. But I think against a good defense like Utah, they'll find a way to exploit it. And I just think ultimately Utah has this experience in a lot of big games. Obviously, being in the Rose Bowl last year, and a ton of tight Pac-12 matchups as well. I'm just gonna have to go with Utah, and I'm gonna pick them to cover as well.
Okay.
Sorry, off camera.
Our last game of the night is going to be Texas A&M at number 1 Alabama. So I'll just let you go first real quick. The spread is large. Alabama -24. We, of course, still don't know the status of Bryce Young and that shoulder injury, whether or not he's going to play in this game. But what do you think here?
Well, I think it comes down to be pretty simple. I this Texas A&M team, if they're gonna cover this spread, they got to score some points. And they've been really on and off offensively so far this year. They've had some okay moments. They've had some moments where you go, I don't know. And it's been a lot of meh with Texas A&M this year, and with the team that had as high as expectations as they have, that's pretty disappointing. Um, I do think that it's Alabama. They're gonna they have the targets on their back. I mean, A&M is gonna come out. They have a lot of talent, so they're just gonna come out and they got nothing to lose. They can just fire their ears back and just go play. And I think there is some freedom in that, but even with that, I don't buy them covering the spread. I just don't see it. I'm gonna pick Alabama to cover, win huge. Um, I just got to see it to believe it with A&M. I mean, even when they were playing Miami earlier this year, I just wasn't. I've just never really bought into A&M's quarterback situation.
It's a little bit more of an interesting conversation considering Bryce Young's status
Right.
is up in the air right now. But if you watch the second half of that game last week, Jalen Milroe, the backup, was able to come in and play really well, and I don't think he's going to be phased considering this game is at home. And we've seen this Alabama receiving corps get healthy, and they're playing a lot better football right now. And Jahmyr Gibbs is one of the better running backs in the country, the transfer from Georgia Tech. So I do think if Alabama is able to run the football effectively against this Texas A&M front, which is sort of the strength of their team, and this is an area they're going to have to win if they want to keep this game close, then this is going to be a fairly easy walk in the park for Alabama. It is a little bit more interesting, and I wanted to talk about just because we don't know about Bryce Young right now. Nick Saban did say it's not long term, so if I had to guess, they're probably going to err on the side of caution this week, given that this game is at home and A&M. While they're certainly not a bad team, we just haven't seen that explosive component. They're probably not too worried about winning this game. I do think it's a Nick Saban coach team. They're going to be coached up. They're going to win this game by a pretty good margin. I do think they're going to win and cover. But you have Tennessee coming, or you're going on the road to face Tennessee next week. So, yeah, you got to take care of business here. Get out of this game healthy and go into next week focus. So as long as they don't look ahead to next week, which Alabama teams typically don't do, I'm not too worried about this. But I do want to give credit to Max Johnson and some of the things he's been able to give this A&M offense. I think it's been, for the most part, pretty solid.
Right. Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. That's never really been a problem with Max Johnson. He is solid. That's for sure. Just those high level plays are where he lacks a little bit. But that's going to do it, guys. A decently long podcast, right around where we normally sit at, hour and 25 minutes. I got tired at the end there. I apologize for that. It's pretty late. We're currently recording at 1:10 a.m. So be patient with us. Thanks. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. We forgot to mention that earlier. Leave a 5-star review. And I guess I'll let Michael sign us off.
Yeah, subscribe to the channel. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to try to, since these are live streams, we're doing a better job of getting these podcasts up on our feed earlier. So this should be up probably tomorrow, if not the next day at the latest,
Right.
if I had to guess. And you, of course, can watch on the YouTube because this was a live stream. So, yeah, this Picks podcast, I think, has been a huge success. Going back to last year, I think people really like it, so we're going to keep on doing it. The day is just going to vary each week because of our schedules. Sometimes we have conflicting schedules. It's a busy time of year in the sports world, so we got to figure some things out. But, yeah, keep an eye out for more content this week. We're planning on, at least I'm planning on, doing my MLB playoff preview on Thursday at some point. Don't have class on Thursday, so I should be able to do that at some point, whether that's in the evening or whether it's during the day. I don't know yet. Whether or not Emy is going to be on that podcast, I don't know yet, but we will see. So keep an eye out for that. And then sometime this weekend, we might be in person again as Emy's on his fall break, and he'll be in town. And NBA season is coming up, so we're going to be talking basketball. So keep an eye out for all that content, and obviously we'll continue in the next week with the playoffs ramping up, football still going on, with basketball just around the corner. So yeah, it's a busy time, but with that being said, until then, I guess just like Roger Maris's 61-year standing home run record, American League home run record, I should clarify, and just like the MLB regular season, the slog of the 162-game regular season, after tomorrow, we are going, gone.
Peace out.